This story is inspired by real events, but all names and details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Imagine this: a quiet town in Montana. The kind of place where everyone knows each other and the rumble of a Harley Davidson can be heard long before it comes into view. In this town lived a man named William, a grandfather whose body was failing but whose spirit burned brighter than ever. His last days were filled not with fear, but with one final wish: to see his grandson, a proud member of the HELLS Angels, roll down the road one more time. But destiny had something far greater in store. What was supposed to be a private farewell between a grandfather and his grandson turned into something no one in town could ever forget. Instead of just one Harley Davidson, the sound of Kashu, 2,000 bikes echoed through the streets. Chrome glistened under the sun, leather jackets lined the sidewalks, and the entire community stopped in awe as thousands of riders arrived in complete silence. Not for rebellion, not for fear, but for love, respect, and brotherhood. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the scene. The smell of gasoline mixing with fresh pine air. The roar of engines that suddenly cut off into a silence so powerful it could make your chest tighten. Then a fragile man in his final moments, overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that his last wish had not only been granted, but magnified beyond anything he could have ever imagined. This is not just a story about motorcycles, it's a story about legacy, loyalty, and the bonds that go deeper than blood. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city and state in the comments below, so we can see how far this story of love and loyalty reaches across America. The grandfather's wish. I can still remember the first time I realized how much my grandfather, William, meant to me. He wasn't just family. He was a man of quiet strength, a storyteller with laugh lines that traced decades of wisdom, and a heart big enough to make anyone feel seen. He lived in a small town in Montana, where the air smelled of pine and the distant roar of Harley Davidsons could always be heard winding through the hills. Even as a kid, I was fascinated by those motorcycles. But it wasn't the engines or the chrome that drew me in. It was the sense of freedom, of brotherhood, of living boldly. As I grew older, I followed in the footsteps of those I admired, and I became a member of the HELLS Angels. It wasn't just about the club, it was about loyalty, respect, and keeping promises. But nothing I had experienced prepared me for the day my grandfather fell seriously ill. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it, his time was short. And one thing became crystal clear: his only wish was to see me ride my Harley one last time. I remember sitting by his bedside the night he told me. His hands, gnarled yet warm, rested on mine. "I just want to see you on that bike one more time," he whispered, his voice barely audible but trembling with longing. My chest tightened, and I felt the weight of every mile I had yet to ride with him, every memory yet to be made, slipping through our fingers like sand. I promised him I'd make it happen, but inside I didn't know how. The town roads were narrow, his condition fragile, and time was not on our side. In the days that followed, I thought about how much this simple request meant to him. It wasn't about the bike or the roar of the engine. It was about seeing me, the legacy of his family, safe, strong, and alive. It was about that silent understanding between us, the bond forged in quiet conversations, shared smiles, and endless stories of adventure. Every time I polished my Harley, I imagined him watching, eyes glimmering with pride. The night before I was supposed to bring him the bike, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the garage, ran my hands over the cold chrome, and felt a surge of both hope and fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if he couldn't see me one last time? I closed my eyes, imagining his smile, the way it would light up the room, and I whispered to the night, "We'll make this happen, Grandpa. I promise." Little did I know the universe and the brothers I'd found in the HELLS Angels were about to turn a private wish into something far greater than either of us could have imagined. But at that moment, it was just him, me, and the anticipation of one last ride together. The weight of that wish pressed against my chest, and in that quiet Montana night, I understood the true meaning of family, loyalty, and love. A bond forged in steel. Growing up, I always thought my grandfather, William, was invincible. He had this quiet strength that made it seem like nothing in the world could touch him. But as a kid, I didn't understand that his true power wasn't in muscles or bravado, it was in his heart. From the very first time he showed me a Harley Davidson, I felt that connection, like the engine's rumble was syncing with something deep inside me. It wasn't just a machine, it was freedom, trust, and a bond that would shape both of our lives. I remember the summers we spent riding along the winding roads outside our Montana town. The wind hitting our faces, the smell of pine and gasoline mixing in the air, and the endless horizon stretching before us. It felt like nothing could ever go wrong. Grandpa would tell me stories about his youth, his adventures, and the lessons he'd learned the hard way. I listened, wide-eyed, imagining him as a younger man, daring and fearless. Each story he told wasn't just entertainment, it was a lesson, a blueprint for living boldly while staying true to yourself. There was one Harley in particular, a gleaming Harley-Davidson Softail with chrome that shone like liquid silver under the Montana sun. That bike became a symbol for both of us. It wasn't just about riding, it was about trust. He taught me how to feel the engine, how to anticipate the road, how to respect the power beneath me, and every time I mounted that bike, I could feel his presence guiding me, as if he were silently saying, "You've got this, kid. I've got you." Our bond wasn't limited to rides and engines. It was in quiet moments too, sitting on the porch, sharing a soda, or just watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He would always ask about my day, genuinely curious, listening with patience and wisdom that only decades of life could give. Those moments built a trust and understanding that transcended words. I knew that no matter where life took me, I could always come back to him, and he would be there, steady and unwavering. As I got older and joined the HELLS Angels, our connection deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Grandpa never judged the club or the lifestyle. Instead, he respected the loyalty, the brotherhood, and the code of honor that came with it. He saw that I was part of something larger than myself, yet he also understood that I was still his grandson, and that bond, our bond, was unbreakable. I often think about how he'd smile, nodding in approval whenever I told him about a ride or a meeting, his eyes sparkling with pride and understanding. The Harley wasn't just a bike anymore. It was a symbol of everything we shared: adventure, freedom, loyalty, and the invisible threads of love connecting us. I could feel his presence every time I gripped the handlebars, every time the engine roared beneath me. It was more than a machine. It was a bridge between generations, a living testament to the bond we forged in steel and trust. Now, as I faced the reality of his last days, I understood just how precious that bond truly was. Every memory, every ride, every shared story became a treasure, a lifeline in the storm of impending loss. I promised myself that I would honor that bond, no matter what it took, and make sure that his last wish, seeing me on my Harley one final time, was not just fulfilled, but remembered, because that's what he deserved, and that's what the bond we forged in steel demanded. The weight of goodbye. The days following my grandfather's diagnosis were heavy, each one carrying a weight I could barely bear. Every morning, I would wake up to the thought that today could be the day I'd lose him, and every night I'd lie awake, haunted by the image of him in his hospital bed. It wasn't just fear, it was the crushing responsibility of knowing that I held the power to give him one last moment of happiness, and yet I felt powerless to guarantee it. Montana's quiet streets, which had once felt endless and free, now seemed small and fragile, as if they too were holding their breath, waiting for what was coming. I would sit by my Harley in the garage, running my hands along the chrome, imagining him beside me. Every scratch, every gleam of the metal reminded me of the rides we had shared, the laughter we had shared, and the lessons he had etched into my soul. How could I take all that and condense it into a single ride, a single memory, one last heartbeat together? The thought of saying goodbye before we had even had our final ride gnawed at me. It was a strange kind of pain, not just grief, but guilt. I wanted to be there for him, to give him the gift of seeing me on my Harley, yet I feared I wouldn't arrive in time. I feared his eyes closing before I could fulfill his wish, the silence that would follow, the emptiness that would fill his favorite chair on the porch. Every scenario played out in my mind like a cruel movie, each one more unbearable than the last. But it wasn't only fear, it was also a profound appreciation for every moment we'd already shared. I remembered his laughter echoing across the open roads, the way the wind would whip past us, carrying our voices into the endless Montana sky. I remembered sitting on the porch with him, sipping iced tea, watching the sunset paint the hills in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Those memories were anchors, grounding me in the love that had always existed between us, reminding me that even in the face of loss, our bond was unbreakable. And yet, as the day of the ride approached, the pressure mounted. I needed to coordinate everything perfectly: the route, the timing, the bikes, and most importantly, ensuring my grandfather was able to experience it safely. The logistics were overwhelming, but more than that, I was terrified of disappointing him. Every night, I would stare at his bed in the dim hospital light and imagine his eyes lighting up as he saw the Harley approaching. Could I make that vision a reality? Could I honor him the way he deserved in his final days? In those quiet hours, I began to understand the true weight of goodbye. It wasn't simply a matter of leaving someone behind. It was a responsibility to carry their love, their memory, and their wishes with every action. I felt the gravity of the moment pressing against my chest, the pulse of anticipation mingling with the ache of impending loss. Every step I took toward fulfilling his wish became both a promise and a prayer, a silent vow to ensure that his final days were filled with the joy, pride, and love he had given me throughout my life. The night before the ride, I sat beside his bed, gripping his hand as he drifted in and out of sleep. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "we'll make this ride something you'll never forget." His hand squeezed mine faintly, a small gesture, but one loaded with trust, love, and the unspoken understanding that what we were about to do was more than a ride. It was a legacy. And in that moment, I realized that fulfilling his last wish wasn't just about seeing him smile. It was about honoring everything he had taught me, every lesson, every story, every heartbeat we had shared along the way. The call to brotherhood. I never expected the scale of what was about to happen. What started as a quiet, personal wish between my grandfather and me soon became a story that rippled far beyond our Montana town. It all began with a single call, a call that carried the weight of loyalty, respect, and something I had always known, but never fully appreciated until now: the power of true brotherhood. I remember dialing my mentor in the HELLS Angels, trying to explain the situation as calmly as I could, even though my voice trembled. "It's my grandfather. He's not going to make it much longer. His last wish. He wants to see me ride one last time." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that somehow carried understanding deeper than words. Then he said simply, "We'll make it happen." That single sentence set everything in motion. Within hours, messages spread through the network of the club, each one a ripple across miles of highways and back roads. "Grandson's last ride," the text read. "Montana. Let's make it unforgettable." I could almost feel the chrome and leather moving across the country, a wave of brothers answering a call not out of obligation, but because that's who they were, men of their word, loyal to their family and their code. As the hours passed, the magnitude of what was coming began to sink in. This wasn't going to be a small gesture. This wasn't a handful of bikes or a few friends riding along. This was hundreds, maybe thousands of men who had dedicated their lives to a code of loyalty stronger than anything else I had ever witnessed. And they were coming for us, not for publicity, not for recognition, but simply because they understood the gravity of a promise, the sacredness of a last wish. I watched the Montana horizon, imagining the long lines of Harley-Davidsons cutting through the sky like silver ribbons. The thought of it gave me chills, excitement mixed with an almost unbearable anxiety. What if something went wrong? What if my grandfather wasn't strong enough to see it? Every scenario played in my mind, yet beneath it all was a steady undercurrent of hope, the kind that only comes when you know you're not alone. I called my grandfather later that night, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grandpa, you're not going to believe what's coming," I said. I could hear his breath, shallow but steady, and then a faint laugh, raspy but filled with wonder. "I don't need to believe it," he said. "I just need to see it." That was all the motivation I needed, the fuel for what would become the ride of a lifetime. Every time I thought about the brothers mobilizing across states, I could feel their presence in my own hands, on the grips of my Harley, in the rumble of the engine beneath me. Brotherhood wasn't just a word. It was a force, a current of loyalty and honor that connected us across distances, across differences, across life itself. They weren't just riding for me. They were riding for him, for the memory of every grandfather who had ever loved, for the legacy of trust that binds generations together. As I prepared for the morning, I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. The roads would soon be alive with the sound of chrome engines and leather jackets glinting in the sun. I knew that when they arrived, it wouldn't just be a ride. It would be a declaration, a statement that loyalty, respect, and love can roar louder than any engine. And in that moment I understood. The call to brotherhood wasn't just answered, it was unstoppable, and it was coming straight for us. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, my grandfather's last wish would ride across Montana like a storm of chrome, leather, and unbreakable loyalty. And I knew, deep in my heart, that nothing, not illness, not distance, not time itself, could stop what was coming. The road awakens. The night before the ride, sleep was impossible. I sat in my garage, surrounded by the familiar scent of gasoline and leather, running my hands over the handlebars of my Harley. I could almost hear the distant hum of engines from the brothers preparing for the journey. In my mind, I pictured them gathering across highways, leaving their towns one by one, the wind carrying their silent promise to honor my grandfather's last wish. By dawn, the first signs of movement appeared. Headlights pierced the early morning mist, chrome glinting like silver knives cutting through the shadows. I felt my heart race with anticipation and fear. Every mile they traveled brought us closer to the moment that could define the last days of my grandfather's life. Each sound in the distance, a low growl, a subtle shift in the road, felt like a drumbeat calling me forward, counting down the moments until everything would converge. As the convoy began to take shape, the scale became almost incomprehensible. Hundreds of Harleys roared to life, their engines vibrating through the ground, sending a shiver up my spine. Leather jackets glinted in the pale light, helmets reflecting the sky like dark mirrors. I could sense the unity among them, the silent communication that needed no words. Every brother knew his place, every rider understood the code, respect, loyalty, and the sacred duty to fulfill a promise. Driving alongside them on the open highways, I felt the weight of every past ride, every lesson my grandfather had taught me about freedom, responsibility, and courage. The wind whipped against my face, carrying with it the faint smell of pine and gasoline. Mixing with the adrenaline thrumming in my veins, I imagined my grandfather watching from somewhere nearby, his eyes lighting up with pride and wonder as the first wave of riders approached Montana. The miles melted away under the combined power of hundreds of engines. Each twist and turn of the road brought with it a rush of emotions, anticipation, anxiety, excitement, and a deep, almost sacred sense of duty. I could feel the presence of my grandfather beside me, even though he was still resting at home, trusting me to lead this improbable caravan. The thought of what lay ahead filled my chest with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, the kind that only comes when you know something extraordinary is about to unfold. Across the state, the convoy grew. Riders joined in from neighboring towns, roads swelling with Harleys that gleamed under the morning sun. It wasn't just a ride anymore. It was a moving testament to brotherhood, to loyalty, and to the quiet power of a promise made and kept. Every engine that roared, every wheel that turned, carried with it the weight of thousands of hearts united by a single purpose: to fulfill my grandfather's last wish. Even in the rearview mirror, I could sense the enormity of it all. The road stretched endlessly, a river of chrome and leather flowing toward a small Montana town where a man lay waiting, unaware of just how much love, respect, and devotion were heading his way. Each mile felt like both a countdown and a lifeline, a reminder that the distance traveled wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and profoundly human. As we neared the town, the landscape transformed. The familiar hills and valleys became the stage for something monumental. I could almost see my grandfather's eyes widening, the lines on his face softening, his heart catching every vibration of the engines approaching. And in that moment, I realized that this ride, this assembly of brotherhood and loyalty, wasn't just about honoring a last wish. It was about showing that love, courage, and devotion can travel thousands of miles, roar louder than any engine, and leave a mark that will never be forgotten. The road was alive, and with every mile we conquered, the anticipation grew, swelling in my chest like the crescendo of a symphony. Tomorrow, my grandfather would see me again on my Harley, surrounded by a force of loyalty and love so immense it could not be measured in words, only in the rumble of engines, the glint of chrome, and the beating hearts of thousands who had answered the call. The arrival in silence. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and early dew, but it was soon overtaken by a deeper, more powerful presence, the hum of thousands of Harley-Davidson engines. As I stood at the edge of our Montana town, my chest tightened with a mixture of awe, anticipation, and disbelief. I had imagined this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer magnitude of what was unfolding. In the distance, the first riders appeared like a slow-moving wave of steel and chrome, their engines vibrating through the ground beneath me. Headlights glimmered like stars on the horizon, and the synchronized rhythm of thousands of bikes approaching felt almost sacred. I could hear the low growl of engines intensifying, a sound that was both thrilling and humbling, a powerful heartbeat echoing across the town. As they drew closer, I noticed something remarkable. The roar of the engines gradually softened, fading into a profound silence, as if the riders themselves understood the gravity of the moment. They weren't here to intimidate, to show off, or to make a spectacle. They were here to honor a promise. Each brother had arrived not as an individual, but as a part of something greater, united by loyalty, respect, and love. I could see their leather jackets glinting under the sun and the careful alignment of every bike, as if choreographed by an invisible hand. The sheer scale was breathtaking. 2,000 Harleys stretching along the town streets, each engine meticulously turned off, each rider standing in silent reverence. The sight was overwhelming, and for a moment I felt tears prick my eyes. This was more than a ride. It was a statement of devotion, a living testament to the power of brotherhood and family. My grandfather, lying in his favorite chair by the porch, looked up as the first wave of riders arrived. I saw his eyes widen, the lines on his face softening in disbelief. His frail body trembled, not from weakness, but from the sheer emotion of realizing that his last wish had not only been granted, but magnified beyond anything he could have imagined. I could hear him whisper, "I don't believe it, I can't believe it." The town was quiet. Neighbors peeked from windows, children ran to the sidewalks, and even the local wildlife seemed to pause in respect. The silence was deafening in its impact, a powerful contrast to the thunderous roar of the journey that had brought these men here. Every biker stood at attention, helmets removed, hands folded, the sun catching their chrome in a dazzling display. It was as if time itself had paused to witness this extraordinary moment. I walked slowly toward my grandfather, my heart pounding in sync with the residual vibrations of the engines. Each step felt sacred, each breath heavy with anticipation. I reached him, took his hand, and could feel the warmth and fragility of his body, the same hands that had guided me, protected me, and taught me the meaning of loyalty. And in that instant, surrounded by thousands of silent riders, I realized that this was more than a fulfillment of a wish. It was a culmination of a lifetime of love, trust, and shared experience. The magnitude of the moment pressed in on me from all sides. The sight, the sound, the smell of gasoline mixed with pine, the weight of history, and the pulse of brotherhood that vibrated through the air. And yet, despite the scale, despite the grandeur, it all came down to one simple truth. My grandfather's last wish was honored, and the love that had defined our family was made visible in the most powerful, unforgettable way imaginable. As I held his hand and looked out at the sea of Harleys, I knew that this was a memory that would never fade. Not just for him, not just for me, but for everyone who witnessed it. A reminder that loyalty, family, and love could roar louder than any engine, and that sometimes the greatest acts of devotion are expressed not in words, but in presence, silence, and the echo of thousands of hearts beating as one. A last ride together. The sun hung low in the Montana sky, casting a warm golden glow over our small town. After the roar of thousands of Harley-Davidsons had faded into respectful silence, the moment we had been waiting for finally arrived. My grandfather, frail but eyes sparkling with anticipation, gripped my hand as I guided him toward my Harley. The chrome gleamed in the afternoon light, the engine waiting silently, like it too understood the significance of this ride. I helped him settle on the bike, the familiar leather seat warm beneath him. I could feel his heartbeat, slow but steady, pounding with excitement, fear, and a lifetime of memories. "Ready?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. In that simple gesture, I felt the weight of every lesson he had taught me, the courage to face life, the importance of loyalty, and the power of love that transcends words. As I revved the engine, the sound wasn't just mechanical, it was a symphony of freedom, a signal that this ride was not merely a journey down the road, but a journey through memory, connection, and the culmination of a lifetime. We moved slowly at first, the tires humming against the asphalt, the town watching in reverent silence. Every turn, every vibration carried the echoes of years spent together, of laughter shared on winding roads, of quiet evenings on the porch. The wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of pine and freshly fallen leaves. I glanced at him, and for a moment I saw the boy he once was, the one who had taught me to respect the road, to trust the engine beneath me, to live boldly. And I realized that this ride wasn't just for him, it was for me too. It was the embodiment of everything we had shared, a living memory that would remain long after the engine cooled and the chrome faded. As we passed the familiar streets, neighbors peeked from windows, children waved, and friends whispered in awe. Some of the HELLS angels rode behind us, silent guardians, a moving wall of brotherhood honoring the moment. Their presence was reassuring, a reminder that loyalty extends far beyond family, that promises made are promises kept. And yet, despite the grandeur, the focus remained on us, grandfather and grandson, connected by love, trust, and the unmistakable bond of shared experience. We stopped for a moment atop a small hill overlooking the valley, the Montana landscape stretching endlessly before us. I turned off the engine, and for a second, the world fell completely silent. I could hear nothing but his breathing, steady now, and the faint rustle of the wind through the trees. He turned to me, eyes glistening, and whispered, "Thank you for this, for everything." I swallowed hard, tears blurring my vision. "No, Grandpa, Thank you for teaching me how to live, how to love, and how to honor those who matter most." We rode on, slowly but deliberately, savoring every second. Every mile was a testament, every vibration a heartbeat, every glance a silent promise that this moment would never be forgotten. I felt his hands tighten around mine, a simple gesture that carried the weight of decades of shared life. The Harley carried us forward, but it was our bond that propelled us, stronger than steel, faster than any engine, more enduring than time itself. When we finally returned home, I helped him off the bike and guided him to his chair by the porch. He sat there, exhausted but radiant, and I knew that this ride had given him something far beyond the mechanical thrill of a Harley. It had given him joy, pride, and the certainty that his legacy lived on. And as I watched him settle in, surrounded by the hum of quiet engines and the echoes of thousands of hearts beating in solidarity, I understood the true meaning of loyalty, love, and family. That ride wasn't just a farewell. It was a celebration of everything we had shared, a living memory forged in steel, leather, and devotion. And I knew in that profound, unshakable way that only moments like this can teach, that it would stay with us forever. Chapter 8. The Power of Presence. As my grandfather settled back into his chair on the porch, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in, not just for us, but for everyone around. The town of Montana was quiet now, but the energy lingered in the air, palpable and electric. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers had gathered along the streets, eyes wide with disbelief, mouths half open in awe, and hearts quietly moved by what they had witnessed. I could feel it in the air. The collective pulse of people realizing that loyalty, love, and devotion could manifest in ways that transcend words. The arrival of 2,000 HELLS angels, silent, respectful, and perfectly aligned, was more than a spectacle. It was a lesson in presence, in showing up fully for someone you care about. Every person in that town, whether they knew my grandfather or not, felt the weight of it. It was as if the engines, now silent, had spoken louder than any speech ever could. Children, who had never seen anything like it, stared in amazement. They pointed at the rows of gleaming Harleys, helmets glinting in the sun, leather jackets lined up like soldiers in formation. I could see their parents' eyes glistening, some brushing away tears discreetly, caught off guard by the sheer humanity of it all. For a moment, the town had forgotten the everyday routine, the quiet lives, the small worries, and instead they were witnesses to something extraordinary, a community transformed by presence, solidarity, and the power of fulfilling a promise. I looked at my grandfather, who sat there, fragile but radiant. The lines on his face softened, his eyes shone brighter than I had ever seen, and a smile spread across his lips, small but luminous. For him, the arrival of the bikers wasn't about numbers or fame. It was about recognition, about feeling valued, loved and understood in a way that transcends everyday gestures. I could see the gratitude in every glance he cast, the relief in his posture, the peace settling over him like a warm blanket on a cold Montana morning. Even the local businesses, normally bustling with quiet monotony, had paused. Shopkeepers stepped outside, eyes wide, waving quietly, unsure whether to clap or simply soak in the moment. Some whispered to each other, wondering if they had ever witnessed something like this in their lifetimes. A few townsfolk ventured closer, feeling compelled to approach the bikers, only to find respectful nods, gentle smiles, and the quiet acknowledgement of a shared understanding. They were here for love, for respect, and nothing else. I walked through the crowd, absorbing the reactions around me. Every handshake, every smile, every quiet nod felt like a confirmation that what had happened was monumental. The presence of thousands of riders, the commitment to a grandfather's last wish, had rippled outward in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just a ride anymore, it was a story being written into the memory of the town, a lesson in loyalty, family, and the simple yet profound act of showing up for someone you care about. As I returned to my grandfather's side, I realized something powerful. Presence is more than physical attendance. It is intention made visible. Every biker who had come, every engine that had roared then silenced, every eye that had met another with understanding, had communicated a message stronger than words. You matter, you are seen, you are loved. And in that moment, the entire town understood that my grandfather, a quiet man of immense heart, had left an imprint not just on me, but on everyone who had witnessed this extraordinary act of devotion. I held his hand once more, feeling the warmth, the fragility, and the life coursing through it. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "They came, all of them, for you." He squeezed my hand gently, eyes glistening with tears, and nodded. No words were needed. The power of presence had spoken, and it had spoken loudly, clearly, and beautifully. That day, I understood something fundamental about life, love, and loyalty. It's not the grand gestures that define us, but the presence we offer when it matters most. And in that quiet Montana town, surrounded by the hum of distant engines now fading, I realized that love, when shown fully and without hesitation, has the power to move mountains, change hearts, and leave an imprint that lasts forever. Legacy on two wheels. The day after the ride, the town seemed almost different. The streets were quiet again, the engines silenced, but the echoes of what had happened lingered in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. My grandfather, still sitting on the porch, looked at me with eyes full of gratitude and pride. For him, the memory of the 2,000 HELLS angels arriving to honor his last wish wasn't just a moment. It was a symbol, a legacy forged in steel, loyalty, and love. As I helped him sip his morning coffee, I couldn't help but reflect on the ride. The feeling of those engines vibrating beneath us, the wind whipping past, and the sheer magnitude of brotherhood surrounding us had left an indelible mark. It wasn't just about motorcycles, it was about presence, about showing up for someone in a way that transcends ordinary gestures. That day, I learned that loyalty isn't measured by words alone. It's measured by action, by commitment, and by the courage to honor promises, no matter how extraordinary. The town seemed transformed too. People approached us with quiet smiles, their eyes filled with understanding and respect. "I've never seen anything like that," one neighbor said, shaking his head in disbelief. Children ran past, talking excitedly about the bikes and the brothers who had come to fulfill my grandfather's wish. Even the local cafe owners, usually absorbed in their routines, paused to chat, to marvel, to simply acknowledge the extraordinary display of devotion. The community had witnessed more than a ride. It had witnessed a living example of love, respect, and the power of presence. I thought about the brothers who had ridden all those miles, some coming from states away, each one answering a call not out of obligation but out of loyalty and honor. Their commitment had left a mark not only on my grandfather but on me, on my understanding of family, and on the way I would navigate life from that day forward. They had shown me that legacy is built not only through words or wealth, but through actions that reflect integrity, love, and courage. My grandfather turned to me that afternoon, his voice quiet but full of warmth. "You've made me proud, son. Proud of the man you've become, proud of the family we built, proud of the way you carry yourself." I could feel the weight of his words pressing gently against my chest. In that moment, I realized that the ride wasn't just his legacy, it was mine too. It was a reminder that what we do for those we love can ripple far beyond ourselves, leaving echoes that inspire, comfort, and connect generations. The Harley, now resting silently in the garage, seemed to radiate a quiet power. It wasn't just a machine, it was a vessel of memories, a reminder of the bond forged on winding Montana roads, of the lessons my grandfather had taught me, and of the extraordinary display of loyalty from the brothers who had answered the call. Every scratch, every gleam of chrome, every vibration I had felt that day became a symbol of something greater, the enduring power of love, loyalty, and commitment. As the sun set over Montana, painting the hills in shades of gold and crimson, I sat beside my grandfather, holding his hand. We didn't need to speak. The memory of the ride, the presence of thousands of brothers, and the overwhelming sense of community had said everything. That day we had shared more than a ride. We had shared a legacy, one that would live on in our hearts, in the stories we told, and in the quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of devotion are shown through presence, commitment, and the courage to honor a loved one's final wish. I realized then that the ride had changed me. It had shown me that loyalty and love could move mountains, that actions speak louder than words, and that legacy isn't inherited. It's built, one act of devotion at a time. And as I watched my grandfather smile in the fading light, I knew that the bond we shared, forged through years of love, guidance, and the roar of Harleys, would live on forever, on two wheels, in our hearts, and in the memory of everyone who had witnessed the extraordinary power of presence and devotion. A farewell etched in memory. The days that followed the ride were quiet, almost surreal. Montana returned to its usual rhythm, the gentle rustle of pine trees, the soft murmur of the river, the occasional rumble of a passing Harley. But for me and for my grandfather, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The memory of that day, of thousands of Harleys rolling into town, silent yet full of devotion, remained vivid, alive in every heartbeat, every glance, every whisper of wind that stirred the prairie grass. I spent those moments beside him, holding his hand, listening to stories I had heard countless times but now felt entirely new. Each word he spoke carried weight. Each laugh and sigh a treasure I couldn't afford to take for granted. Time was fleeting, but in those quiet hours I understood that legacy isn't measured by how long someone lives. It's measured by the love, respect, and memories they leave behind. And my grandfather, in his final days, had crafted a legacy more powerful than I could have imagined. On the last morning we shared together, I helped him onto the porch one more time. The sun cast long shadows across the familiar streets, painting everything in warm gold. I could see the pride in his eyes, a spark of mischief and wonder that hadn't faded with age or illness. "You've made me proud," he said softly, his voice trembling but full of emotion. "Not just today, but always. You carried me, our family, and our story with honor." I choked back a tear, nodding, unable to find words that could capture the depth of what I felt. The memory of the HELLS Angels' arrival, the engines, the chrome, the leather jackets, the silence, the unity, flashed in my mind. It wasn't just a ride. It was a declaration of loyalty, a celebration of life, and a final act of love that would remain etched in memory forever. I realized that the presence of those thousands of riders had transformed a personal wish into a communal experience, one that touched hearts far beyond our own. It had taught me something profound. Love, when expressed fully and courageously, transcends time, distance, and circumstance. As the day unfolded, neighbors and friends came by to visit, to offer their quiet support, to witness the final moments of a life so full of love, wisdom, and resilience. I watched as my grandfather smiled, holding my hand, sharing a gentle laugh with the people around him. Even in his weakness, he radiated strength, a strength born not from physical power, but from decades of living fully, giving fully, and loving without hesitation. When the time finally came, I held him close, whispering words that I hoped would carry all the gratitude, love, and admiration I felt. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything," I said, "for your guidance, your lessons, your love, for showing me what it means to honor a promise, to live boldly, and to love fiercely." His hand squeezed mine one last time, and in that simple gesture, I felt the weight of a lifetime of connection, a lifetime of love, distilled into a single heartbeat. After he passed, I sat on the porch alone, listening to the wind and remembering the ride, the engines, the unity, and the extraordinary presence of those 2,000 HELLS Angels. I realized that the true power of that day wasn't in the spectacle but in the meaning behind it, the reminder that loyalty, devotion, and love can ripple across lives, communities, and generations. My grandfather's last wish had been honored in a way that none of us could have imagined, leaving a legacy that would endure far beyond his lifetime. Even now, every time I hear the faint rumble of a Harley in the distance, I think of that day. I think of the love that surrounded us, the unity that carried us, and the lessons my grandfather instilled in me. And I know deep in my heart that some farewells are never truly endings. They are imprints on the soul, reminders that love, loyalty, and family are eternal, etched forever in memory, in the roar of engines and in the quiet strength of the bonds we share. Echoes of a legacy months have passed since that extraordinary day in Montana, yet the memory remains as vivid as ever. I can still feel the vibration of thousands of Harley-Davidsons beneath me, hear the low hum of engines turning to silence, and see the rows of leather-clad brothers standing in unwavering respect. That moment, etched into the fabric of my life, has become more than a memory. It has become a compass guiding how I live, love, and honor the people who matter most. Every time I walk through town, I notice subtle changes. Neighbors smile with a shared understanding, children speak excitedly about the bikes that came for Grandpa, and even strangers pause, sensing the quiet power of what unfolded. It's as if the presence of those 2,000 riders left an invisible thread connecting everyone, a reminder that acts of loyalty and love ripple far beyond the immediate moment. For me, the impact is even more profound. I carry my grandfather's lessons in every choice I make, in every relationship I nurture, and in every challenge I face. His courage, kindness, and unwavering commitment to family have become part of who I am. The ride taught me that loyalty isn't just a word, it's action, presence, and the courage to show up fully even when it's difficult or extraordinary. Sometimes late at night, I sit on the porch where he once sat, looking out at the horizon and imagining the sea of Harleys rolling across the Montana landscape. I think about the brothers who answered the call, strangers who became part of something greater, and how their presence magnified the power of a simple wish into a moment that touched an entire community. It reminds me that we are all capable of creating lasting impact when we act with intention, love, and courage. The legacy of that day lives on, not just in stories or photographs, but in the way it continues to shape hearts and inspire loyalty, compassion, and devotion. And as I hold my grandfather's hand in memory, I realize that some bonds never fade. They resonate across time, echoing in the roar of an engine, the warmth of a shared smile, and the quiet strength of knowing that love and presence are the most powerful legacies we can leave behind. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and how you honor the people you love. Share your experiences in the comments. I'm curious to see how acts of loyalty and love ripple in your world too.